The African sun hung like a burning coin in the bleached sky, its merciless heat baking the cracked riverbed into jagged tiles. Chance, a golden-furred wild pup barely 3 weeks old, bounded after a skittering lizard with the reckless joy of youth. His tiny paws kicked up puffs of red dust as he zigzagged across the parched earth. But the crumbling riverbank concealed a deadly trap. Without warning, the earth shuddered, rocks tumbling down in a thunderous avalanche of stone and dirt. Faith, his mother, spun around just in time to see her pup vanish beneath the deadly cascade. Her heart froze mid-beat. As the dust settled, the horror became clear. Chance's small body lay pinned beneath a massive sandstone slab, only his trembling front paw visible in the cruel sunlight. His weak, gasping whimpers cut through the heavy air like knives. The river that had once given life had become an executioner. Faith scrambled to the boulder in a frenzy of desperation, her claws scraping uselessly against the unyielding stone. Chance's cries grew weaker by the second, his breaths coming in shallow, irregular gasps. Dark blood matted his cream-colored fur where the crushing weight had torn his delicate skin. She dug frantically with her forepaws, throwing clods of earth aside with her muzzle. But the boulder might as well have been a mountain. Around them, the endless savanna stretched in indifferent silence. No help, no mercy, just the pitiless sun beating down. Chance's whimpers faded to barely audible whines, his eyelids fluttering as he fought to stay conscious. Faith's muscles burned with exhaustion, her tongue lolling from the desperate effort. For the first time in her life as a fierce hunter, she tasted the bitter dregs of complete helplessness. Somewhere in the shimmering distance, hyenas cackled, nature's cruel reminder that the clock was ticking. Her strength spent, Faith staggered back from the immovable stone. Then, in an act that defied all natural instinct, she did something extraordinary. Rising onto her hind legs, she pressed her front paws together beneath her chin like a penitent monk. Her golden eyes turned skyward, her entire body trembling with supplication. A wild dog, praying? It was an image that would have shocked any naturalist. But in this moment of extremity, instinct meant nothing. Only raw, desperate hope remained. The scorching wind carried her silent plea across the indifferent wilderness. Would anything answer? Would anything in this harsh world care? The pitiless sun glared down, offering no solace. Yet Faith held her unnatural pose, a mother's last, best hope against the cruel mathematics of survival in the wild. A shadow fell across the cracked earth, long and dark. Amani, a matriarch elephant with the wisdom of decades in her eyes, paused mid-stride, her great ears lifting like radar dishes. She had seen wild dogs countless times before, always running, always hunting, always dangerous. But this, a predator on its knees in submission, the scent of blood and fear reached her sensitive trunk. Her herd waited ahead, their rumbles of concern carrying on the wind. Every instinct, every lesson of survival screamed at her to keep walking. Yet, Amani took one slow, deliberate step forward. Then another. The ground trembled subtly beneath her colossal weight. Faith tensed, every muscle coiled. Was this salvation approaching, or simply a different kind of death? Faith didn't run, didn't snarl, didn't bare her teeth in defensive threat. She remained perfectly, impossibly still, her golden eyes locked with Amani's deep, knowing gaze. The elephant towered over her, a living mountain of muscle and bone that could crush them both without a second thought. But Faith's posture spoke louder than any growl. This was total surrender, a plea from one mother to another. Amani's trunk twitched thoughtfully, her attention shifting to the trapped pup whose breathing had become dangerously shallow. The ancient laws of the wild, written in blood and survival, screamed for her to walk away. But deeper than instinct, something older stirred. Memory, recognition, a debt unpaid across the years. Amani moved with the deliberate grace of her kind. Her powerful trunk, capable of uprooting trees, slid beneath the boulder with surprising delicacy. Muscles like steel cables tensed beneath her wrinkled hide. The stone groaned in protest, Then, with a resounding crack, the massive rock lifted, rolling aside as if it were mere driftwood. Dust swirled in the sudden silence, catching the afternoon light like gold powder. There lay Chance, limp and dust-covered, but miraculously alive. Faith rushed to him in a blur of movement, her tongue working frantically to clean his face, his paws, his tiny chest, confirming the miracle with every frantic touch. Amani watched, her dark eyes pools of quiet understanding. No triumph, no fanfare, just the silent acknowledgement of a choice made. Faith nuzzled Chance's ribs with desperate urgency, willing him to move, to breathe, to live. For one terrible, endless moment, he lay utterly still, a small, broken thing in the dust. Then a gasp, a shuddering inhale that seemed to take all his remaining strength. His tail gave the faintest, most precious twitch. Faith's entire body sagged with relief, her tongue continuing its ministrations with renewed vigor. Amani remained nearby, a silent, towering guardian as the wild dog tended to her pup. The elephant's presence, once the ultimate threat, now felt like sanctuary itself. Around them, the savannah held its breath, bearing witness to this most unlikely of alliances. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the world in gold and violet, Amani took a single step back. Faith lifted her head, their eyes meeting one last time across the gulf of their species. No sounds passed between them. None were needed. The matriarch turned with majestic slowness, her massive form becoming a silhouette against the dying light. Behind her, the savannah seemed to pause in reverence. The wind shifted, carrying the first promising scent of rain, nature's blessing on this extraordinary moment. Faith gathered Chance gently in her jaws, his small body limp with exhaustion, and carried him toward the safety of the den, her steps lighter than they'd been in hours. Amani rejoined her herd under the spreading arms of an ancient acacia. The eldest female rumbled a question, her sharp eyes missing nothing. In response, Amani ran her sensitive trunk along the old scar circling her foreleg, a jagged, hairless reminder of a poacher's trap from seasons long past. That day, when death seemed certain, a wild dog's persistent howls had drawn her herd to the rescue. That dog, now dust and memory, had eyes exactly like Faith's. Some deaths transcended generations. Some kindnesses echoed across the years, waiting for their moment of repayment. The herd fell silent, understanding dawning in their wise eyes. Dusk settled over the land like a soft blanket as Faith reached the shelter of the den. At the entrance, she paused, looking back across the darkening plains now painted in shades of indigo and amber. Far in the distance, barely visible, Amani stood silhouetted against the fading light like a monument to compassion. Faith dipped her head low, her posture conveying what no words could. The elephant's ear flapped once, a simple acknowledgement passing between them. Then night fell completely, wrapping both creatures in its velvety embrace. No trumpets shattered the stillness. No howls pierced the dark. Just the eternal wind, carrying a mother's gratitude into the vast, starlit wilderness. Faith returned to her den with Chance cradled gently in her jaws. The other wild dogs circled, sniffing the air, their noses wrinkled at the unfamiliar scent clinging to the pup. Elephant. The alpha male growled low in his throat, his hackles rising. Wild dogs did not associate with elephants. They were prey, not allies. Faith placed Chance down carefully before turning to face the pack, her body tense but resolute. The alpha snapped his teeth, demanding answers. But how could she explain what even she didn't fully understand? Under the moon's silver glow, Amani stood at the edge of the watering hole, her reflection rippling in the still water. The memory surfaced again. The searing pain of the snare biting into her leg, the panic as she thrashed against the unyielding metal. Then, the wild dog's howls piercing the night, drawing her herd to her rescue. That dog had saved her life, and today she had repaid that debt. But as she dipped her trunk into the cool water, she wondered, was it truly repaid? Or had she only balanced the scales of a much older story? Whispers spread through the savannah like fire. A young vervet monkey chattered the tale to his troop, his hands gesturing wildly. A jackal paused mid-hunt, ears pricking at the strange story. Even the lions, dozing in the shade, flicked their tails at the rumor. A wild dog had prayed, and an elephant had answered. The animals who witnessed it carried the story in their eyes, passing it along in glances and gestures. Nature had bent its own rules that day, and the wilderness would not forget. Chance limped at Faith's side, his once playful steps now cautious. Every rock, every rustle in the grass made him freeze. The trauma of being trapped had rewired him. Where other pups tumbled and chased, he hesitated. Faith watched him with aching pride and sorrow. Her brave pup, who had faced death and survived, now moved through the world like it was made of knives. But in his eyes, something else flickered, an understanding deeper than his years. He had seen mercy where none should have been given, and that knowledge would shape him in ways the pack couldn't yet see. The rains never came. Day after day, the sun blazed hotter, baking the earth into cracked plates. The river shrank to a muddy trickle. Prey grew scarce. Tensions rose. At the dwindling watering hole, impalas stamped nervously as lions lingered too close. Baboons bared their teeth over a handful of berries. And the wild dogs, once a united pack, began to fracture. Hunger gnawed at their bonds. Faith watched as the alpha male turned his back on a weaker member, refusing to share the meager meal. The rules of survival were changing, and she knew soon they would all have to choose between instinct and something far more fragile. The cackle echoed through the night, too close to the den. Faith's head jerked up, ears straining. Hyenas, a pack of them, their laughter masking their numbers. Chance pressed against her, his small body trembling. The wild dogs formed a tight circle around the pups, lips peeled back in silent snarls. But they were outnumbered, weak from hunger, and the hyenas knew it. Their yellow eyes gleamed in the moonlight as they closed in, saliva dripping from their jaws. Faith bared her teeth, but inside, cold fear coiled in her belly. This wasn't just a hunt. It was a reckoning. The hyenas advanced, their stench thick in the air. The alpha male lunged, but a vicious snap sent him reeling back, blood streaking his shoulder. Faith's mind raced. They couldn't win this fight, but what other choice was there? Her gaze flicked to the horizon, to where, days ago, an impossible answer had come. The pack yelped as another hyena darted in, nipping at their heels. Faith closed her eyes, and then, in the chaos, she did the unthinkable once more. She rose, paused together, head bowed. The hyenas hesitated, confused by this strange surrender. But Faith wasn't surrendering. She was calling. The ground trembled. At first, the hyenas didn't notice, too focused on their prey. Then the vibrations grew stronger. Branches snapped. A trumpet split the night. The hyenas whirled as Amani emerged from the darkness, her massive form a shadow against the stars. Behind her, the rest of her herd materialized, a wall of muscle and tusks. The hyenas' bravado evaporated. With panicked yelps, they scattered into the night. Amani watched them go, then turned to Faith. Their eyes met. No words, just a silent understanding. The debt wasn't repaid after all. It had only just begun. Amani lingered as dawn painted the sky pink. Then, with a slow turn, she began to walk. Faith hesitated, then followed. The herd moved with purpose, their path cutting through the barren land. For hours they traveled until the air changed dampness, greenness. And then, hidden in a fold of the earth, it appeared. A small, spring-fed pool, surrounded by lush grass. A sanctuary untouched by the drought. Amani dipped her trunk into the water and sprayed it gently over Chance's back, washing away the dust of their journey. Faith drank deeply, her throat aching with gratitude. This was no accident. This was a gift. But paradise was never unguarded. A roar shattered the peace. From the rocks above, a male lion stared down, his golden eyes burning with possession. This was his territory, his water. The elephants tensed, forming a protective circle. Faith's hackles rose as Chance pressed against her legs. The lion snarled, saliva dripping from his fangs. He was starving, desperate, And a desperate lion was the most dangerous creature of all. Amani stepped forward, her ears flaring wide. A challenge. The air crackled with tension. The standoff had begun. And Faith realized with sudden clarity, this was no longer just about survival. It was about who would define the new rules of their changing world. Faith stepped forward, her body trembling but her gaze steady. The lion's lips curled back, revealing yellowed fangs. Amani rumbled low in her throat. A warning. But Faith knew brute strength wouldn't win this battle. Slowly, deliberately, she lowered herself to the ground, belly exposed in ultimate submission. The lion hesitated, his tail flicking in confusion. Then Faith did something extraordinary. She nudged Chance forward with her nose. The tiny pup wobbled toward the king of beasts, his innocent eyes wide with trust. The lion's growl died in his throat. For the first time in his ruthless life, he faced not fear, but trust. The moment hung suspended, until a hyena's distant laugh shattered it. The lion's instincts surged back. With a roar, he lunged. Amani reacted instantly, trumpeting as she charged forward, her massive bulk moving with shocking speed. Tusks gleamed in the sunlight as she intercepted the attack, forcing the lion to twist midair to avoid being gored. The herd closed ranks around Faith and Chance, forming an impenetrable wall of gray. Dust swirled as the lion scrambled back, his pride wounded but his body intact. He snarled once more, then vanished into the tall grass. The oasis was safe, for now. That night, as a crimson moon rose, something remarkable happened. The lion returned not to attack, but to drink. Amani watched warily as he approached the far edge of the waterhole. Faith tensed, but Chance, in his innocence, wagged his tail. A strange understanding passed between the natural enemies. The lion drank his fill, then lifted his massive head. For a heartbeat, his golden eyes met Faith's. No snarl, no threat, just acknowledgement. When he disappeared again into the night, he left something unexpected behind. The first fragile thread of truce. The weeks passed, and Chance grew stronger under the oasis's protection. When Faith joined the pack's hunt, he begged to follow. Reluctantly, she allowed it. The impala herd scattered before them, but as Chance closed in on a young buck, he faltered. The animal's terrified eyes mirrored his own when trapped beneath the rock. At the last second, he veered away. The pack snarled in frustration, but Faith understood. Her son had learned mercy before he'd learned to kill. As the disappointed hunters trotted back, Chance lingered, watching the impala vanish into the golden grass. A new kind of predator was being born. One humid afternoon, as Amani bathed in the shallows, Chance noticed the jagged scar circling her foreleg. He whined softly, remembering his own pain. Amani extended her trunk, allowing him to sniff the old wound. Faith watched as understanding dawned in her pup's eyes. This was no ordinary mark. It was a story of suffering and salvation. Chance licked the tough skin gently, as if trying to heal what time couldn't. Amani's deep eyes softened. Some bonds transcended species. Some pains created kinship across the divide of predator and prey. The dry season worsened. One parched evening, a desperate buffalo herd stormed the oasis. The elephants formed their usual defensive circle, but this time they left an opening. Amani trumpeted, her call carrying clearly to where Faith and her pack sheltered nearby. The message was unmistakable. Come. Trembling with instinctual fear, the wild dogs darted through the elephantine barrier just as the buffalo crashed down upon them. Tusks and trunks became their shield. That night, under a blanket of stars, predators and prey rested side by side, protected by the most unlikely of guardians. Dawn brought a new terror, a distant orange glow. Humans. Their brushfire advanced relentlessly, swallowing the dry grassland. Panicked animals fled in all directions. Amani's ears fanned wide, catching the crackle of approaching flames. She trumpeted urgently, herding her group toward the only possible escape, a rocky outcrop where the fire couldn't reach. But the wild dogs couldn't keep pace. As smoke choked the air, Faith faced an impossible choice. Follow the elephants into unknown terrain, or risk the inferno to find familiar ground. Chance pressed against her, his small body shaking. The decision had to be made now. As the fire's roar grew deafening, Faith did what wild dogs do best. She raised her voice. Her howl pierced the chaos, clear and desperate. Amani stopped mid-stride, turning back. Faith howled again, this time gesturing with her nose toward a family of warthogs trapped by the flames. The elephants hesitated. Prey animals, natural enemies. Then, with a decisive rumble, Amani led her herd crashing back through the smoke. Tusks scooped up warthog piglets while massive bodies shielded adults from the worst of the heat. Faith's warning had been heard and answered. What happened next defied nature itself. Elephants, warthogs, wild dogs, even a limping giraffe, raced together towards safety. The fire licked at their heels, but Amani's knowledge of the land guided them to a rocky gully where the flames couldn't follow. As they collapsed in the shelter, coughing and exhausted, something extraordinary happened. The warthog matriarch approached Faith and gently touched noses with her. No words, just gratitude. Around them, other animals who would normally be hunting or fleeing each other simply rested, united by survival. The rules of the wild had been rewritten, if only for this moment. Just as hope flickered to life, a new sound split the air. A sharp crack. Human hunters drawn by the fire's chaos. A young elephant calf screamed as blood blossomed on its shoulder. The herd panicked. Amani trumpeted in rage and grief, her protective instincts surging. Faith herded Chance and the pack into the rock's deepest crevices. Through the smoke, she glimpsed the hunters, their faces alight with cruel excitement. This was no survival hunt. This was slaughter. And as another shot rang out, Faith realized with terrible clarity, the greatest threat wasn't the fire. It was the two-legged predators who had started it. The gunshots turned the sanctuary into a war zone. Amani positioned her massive body between the hunters and the wounded calf. Her ears flared wide in defiance. The other elephants formed a protective wall, their trunks raised like battle standards. Faith watched from the rocks, her instincts screaming to flee. But Chance trembled against her, his eyes locked on the bleeding calf. The hunters advanced, their rifles glinting. Then, from the smoke, an unexpected ally emerged. The lion from the oasis, his golden mane matted with ash. With a thunderous roar, he charged the humans' flank. Nature's greatest enemies had become brothers in arms against their common foe. Chaos erupted. A bullet grazed Faith's shoulder as she darted to drag a terrified jackal pup to safety. The pack's alpha male wasn't so lucky. He took a direct hit to the hindquarters, collapsing with a yelp. Faith reached his side as his breathing grew labored. His fading eyes held hers, and in that moment, the old hierarchy dissolved. With his last strength, he nudged her forward, a silent passing of leadership. As his chest stilled, Faith raised her muzzle and howled. Not in grief, but in promise. The hunt would continue. The pack would survive. But nothing would ever be the same. With the humans momentarily driven back, Chance surprised them all. While the adults recovered, he slipped away, returning minutes later with medicinal herbs clutched in his jaws, the same ones Faith had used to heal his trapped paw. The young elephant calf whimpered as Chance carefully placed the leaves against its bullet wound. Amani watched, her ancient eyes gleaming with something like pride. The pup who had been saved was now the savior, bridging the gap between their species with quiet courage. Around them, the other animals began emerging from hiding, drawn by this living symbol of hope. As night fell, Amani did something extraordinary. With deliberate movements, she began digging at the oasis's edge with her tusks. The others watched as water bubbled up from the newly exposed spring, creating a second, smaller pool. Then, with a final glance at Faith, the matriarch led her herd into the darkness. Not in retreat, but with purpose. They were heading for the human settlement. The message was clear. The animals would protect their own. The oasis would remain a sanctuary. And Amani, in her wisdom, had ensured its survival even if she didn't return. Word of the oasis spread through the animal kingdom like monsoon rains. A young cheetah, starving from the drought, approached hesitantly, only to find the wild dogs standing down, allowing her to drink. A troop of baboons kept watch from the trees, screeching warnings at any human scent. Even the crocodiles in the deeper pools remained strangely passive. The rules had changed. The lion patrolled the perimeter, his roars keeping poachers at bay. And at the center of it all stood faith and chance, living proof that survival didn't have to mean savagery. The legend had become reality. Faith led differently than her predecessor. When the pack hunted, she enforced new rules. The old and weak ate first. Disputes were settled with nuzzles rather than teeth. And when a starving leopard approached one moonless night, the pack stood their ground, but didn't attack. Chance, now nearly grown, mediated between them, his calm presence diffusing the tension. By dawn, the leopard had slunk away, but left a freshly killed gazelle near the den entrance the next evening. The message was unmistakable. Even predators recognized this new order. The oasis's influence was spreading. Not all humans were enemies. One morning, a lone figure approached, an old Maasai warrior, his spear carried horizontally in the universal sign of peace. He knelt at the oasis's edge, marveling at the mixed animals drinking together. When his gaze met Faith's, there was no fear, only recognition. Days later, he returned with village children, teaching them to leave offerings of fruit rather than set traps. The warrior's eyes lingered on Chance, seeing in him what few humans ever could, proof that nature's heart still beat with compassion beneath its fierce exterior. The changes rippled outward. At the nearby wildlife reserve, rangers noticed something strange. Poachers' snares were being dismantled. Not by humans, but as if elephants had carefully pulled them apart with their trunks. Camera traps captured astonishing footage. Wild dogs leading injured antelope to safety, lions sharing kills with jackals. The most hardened rangers found themselves wiping away tears. When a corrupt official ordered the construction of a new hunting boundary fence, it stood for exactly one night before being reduced to splinters, though no human saw what exactly had transpired in the moonlight. Seasons turned. Faith's muzzle grayed, but her eyes remained bright. One evening, as the sky burned orange, she gathered the pack for a final hunt. Not for food, but to drive a group of poachers from the territory. Returning victorious but exhausted, she nuzzled each member in turn, saving Chance for last. Their foreheads pressed together, communicating without sound. As the first stars appeared, Faith walked slowly to the oasis's edge, drank deeply, then lay down facing the water. Her breathing slowed, then stopped. But the peace on her face wasn't death. It was fulfillment. The pack's howls that night weren't mournful, but triumphant. A celebration of a life that had changed everything. At dawn, the animals gathered. Elephants, lions, antelope, even the old Maasai warrior. Chance stood where Faith had taken her last breath, then did something that sent shivers through all present. He rose onto his hind legs, front paws pressed together in perfect imitation of his mother's desperate prayer so long ago. Amani, older now but still regal, stepped forward. Her trunk curled gently around Chance's shoulders in an unmistakable gesture. The promise was renewed. The legend would continue. And as the morning sun broke over the savannah, it illuminated not just survival, but the fragile, enduring possibility of harmony. The dry season winds carried the scent of acacia blossoms as Amani led her herd to a quiet clearing. The old matriarch moved slowly, her once powerful frame now gaunt with age. With her trunk, she brushed aside the brittle grass to reveal smooth stones arranged in a circle, an elephant graveyard known only to her kind. Amani knelt beside the bones of her ancestors, her rumbling vibrations shaking the earth. The herd gathered close, their trunks gently touching her wrinkled skin in farewell. As the sun dipped below the baobabs, Amani closed her eyes for the last time, her final breath leaving her body not in sorrow, but in the peace of a life that had rewritten. A new generation tumbled through the golden grass. Chance's pups, born without the instinct to cower. They played fearlessly beneath the lion's watchful gaze, nipping at giraffe calves' heels before darting away in giggles of barks. The old rules no longer applied. When a curious baby elephant splashed too close to the water's edge, one brave pup leaped in after, paddling circles around the startled calf until both collapsed in the mud, exhausted and joyous. The animals who remembered the old ways, the hunger, the fear, watched with wonder. These children knew only unity. The oasis had become more than a sanctuary. It was the birthplace of a new world. The rains came at last, not in gentle showers, but in a thunderous deluge that lasted 7 days. The parched riverbed swelled, its rushing waters carving new paths through the drought-cracked earth. Animals gathered along the banks, watching the miracle unfold. Chance stood at the water's edge, his reflection rippling beside the Maasai elder who had become their human guardian. The old man placed a gnarled hand on Chance's head, whispering words only the wind could hear. Some said the rains came because the land itself remembered faith's prayer. Others claimed Imani's spirit had summoned the storms. But as the first rainbow arced across the sky, only one truth mattered. The wilderness had healed itself. A gaunt stranger stumbled into the village one evening, his clothes torn, his eyes wild. The children scattered, but the Maasai elder recognized him, a poacher who had disappeared months earlier. The man collapsed at the elder's feet, babbling about visions in the bush, elephant ghosts with eyes like molten gold, wild dogs that spoke in human voices. He thrust a yellowed tusk into the elder's hands. Imani's, taken years before. They showed me everything, he sobbed. That night, as the village slept, the elder buried the tusk where faith had last stood. By dawn, the poacher was gone. But the oasis flowers bloomed brighter than ever before. No one knew who built it. One morning, the animals awoke to find smooth stones stacked taller than a giraffe at the oasis's heart, each one bearing strange markings. The baboons chattered nervously, while the elephants circled in quiet contemplation. Chance approached first, sniffing the cool stones. Then he did something extraordinary. He placed Faith's favorite bone at the base. Within days, other offerings appeared. A lion's whisker, an eagle's feather, even a child's beaded bracelet left by the Maasai. The monument stood as neither shrine nor grave, but as a promise, written in the only language that transcended species. The wilderness would remember. On the anniversary of Faith's passing, Chance climbed the highest rock at dusk and unleashed a howl that echoed across the savannah. From the distant mountains, a lion roared in response. Elephants trumpeted. Even the frogs in the river stilled their croaking to listen. Then, impossibly, a single wild dog's cry answered from beyond the horizon. Clear and strong and achingly familiar. Chance's ears pricked forward. The pack stirred, sensing something beyond human understanding. That night, under a sky dense with stars, the animals slept a little closer together. Some bonds could not be broken even by death. Years flowed like the river now. The oasis thrived, its influence spreading across the land. Rare black rhinos drank beside cheetahs. Hyena cubs played with warthog piglets under the watchful eyes of aging lionesses. And at the center stood Chance, his muzzle gone gray but his eyes still bright with his mother's fire. When new animals arrived, frightened, injured, or simply curious, he greeted them with the same gentle nuzzle Faith had once given him. The old Maasai elder often sat beside him, his gnarled fingers scratching behind Chance's ears as they watched the sunset together. The circle remained unbroken. The legend lived. A small girl with beaded braids crouched in the grass, her brown eyes wide with wonder. The wild dog pups approached without fear, licking her toes until she giggled. Her grandfather, the Maasai elder, nodded approvingly. "You see," he whispered, "this is how the world was meant to be." The girl reached out, letting a tiny pup nibble her fingers. In that moment, she made a silent vow to protect this place, these creatures, this fragile piece. Somewhere, a breeze stirred the monument's offerings, making the bones and feathers dance. The child who remembered would become the next guardian. The story would continue. Seasons turned. Generations passed. Humans came and went, but the oasis endured. Some said Chance lived forever, his spirit woven into the very fabric of the land. Others claimed to see a golden-eyed wild dog leading lost animals to safety during storms. The monument grew taller with each passing year, its stones worn smooth by countless trunks, paws, and human hands. And if you listened closely on quiet evenings, when the wind rustled just right through the acacia trees, you might hear it, a whisper of paws pressing together, an echo of the prayer that started it all. The wilderness never forgot. The documentary crew arrived at dawn, their cameras capturing the miracle no science could explain. Predators and prey drinking side by side, a lioness nuzzling a wild dog pup, an ancient elephant gently guiding a lost human child back to their village. As the narrator struggled to find words, the Maasai elder, now over 100 years old, smiled knowingly. This was never about animals learning human ways, he told them, his voice like dry leaves. This was about humans remembering what animals never forgot. The cameras kept rolling as a great grandpup of Chance's, bearing Faith's exact golden eyes, rose on her hind legs and pressed her paws together in perfect prayer. Somewhere beyond the veil of time, a matriarch elephant trumpeted her approval. The legacy endured. The wild had spoken, and its message was love.